Welcome to Undercurrents, our daily news show from Unheard's Washington Bureau. Today's guest is Tom Rogan. Subscribe here wherever you get your podcasts and over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Happy Thursday, everyone. I have to announce the mysterious drone sightings continue across America's East Coast, but you didn't need me to tell you that. We all know. They're being seen from off the shore of New Jersey all the way to actually interior regions that are as far west as Ohio. The FAA dates the start of this wave to November 18th, meaning we are now a month deep, and absolutely nobody in the government seems to know what's happening, at least not in public. Michael McCaul, a Republican from Texas, is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Tuesday night, McCaul made big news by suggesting the drones were likely surveilling the U.S. on China's behalf. Here's what he said.
We need to identify who is behind these drones. My judgment, based on my experience, is that those that are over our military sites are adversarial and most likely are coming from the People's Republic of China.
But earlier that same day, the Pentagon, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and the FAA released a joint statement clearly intended to reassure the public by saying that sightings over restricted airspace are not new, and they've not identified anything, quote, anomalous. Here's from the statement. FBI has received tips of more than 5,000 reported drone sightings in the last few weeks, with approximately 100 leads generated, and the federal government is supporting state and local officials in investigating these reports. Consistent with each of our unique missions and authorities, we are quickly working to prioritize and follow these leads. We have sent advanced detection technology to the region, and we have sent trained visual observers, the agency said. They added, quote, having closely examined the technical data and tips from concerned citizens, we assess that the sightings to date include a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, and law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, and stars mistakenly reported as drones. We have not identified anything anomalous and do not assess the activity to date to present a national security or public safety risk over the civilian airspace in New Jersey or other states in the Northeast. Now here's another interesting part. Quote, additionally, there have been a limited number of visual sightings of drones over military facilities in New Jersey and elsewhere, including within restricted airspace. Such sightings near or over DoD installations are not new. I had to read that whole thing in full so you just get a sense of what they're trying to say. This statement has the same problem all of the other statements from the administration have had. It relies on an unresolvable tension between insisting the public is safe while also conceding essentially that they don't know exactly what is happening. When House Republican lawmaker Jeff Van Drew, who is from New Jersey where the sightings seem to be concentrated, said a source told him Iran was responsible for the aircrafts, the Pentagon rejected this claim. But they did so while also, again, essentially conceding they don't fully know what's happening. Here's what President Biden said around the same time that McCaul made his remarks this week.
Nothing nefarious, apparently, but they're checking it all out. We're following it closely. So far, no sense of danger.
This exchange between Martha MacCallum and John Kirby, speaking on behalf of the White House on national security, was especially tough.
Do you know and you can't say? Can you tell me that?
No, I'm telling you, Martha, I'm telling you, we don't know. We can't corroborate every single sighting. Some of them we have, not all of them, and we're working hard to do that.
In the absence of clear information, many theories are circulating, going viral. We've all seen them, and understandably so. The government can't get its story straight. This has been happening for weeks and likely reflects a serious national security breach, so of course people are speculating. But is it us? Is it China? Is it, dare I say, extraterrestrial? Not every theory being floated around right now is serious, but we obviously need answers, and the situation is serious. So I can think of no better person to break all of this down than our friend Tom Rogan of the Washington Examiner, who recently covered this topic in an excellent report for us at Unheard as well. I just sat down with Tom to dive deep into one of the strangest stories that I have encountered as a journalist. Tom Rogan, who I guess you're my personal Pentagon correspondent. You're my personal UFO correspondent. So I just bring you here whenever I have questions. Thank you for coming back to Undercurrents.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And here you are in person, but you had to be in person today because this is maybe this is one of the strangest stories that has ever come across my desk as a journalist. And it is the damn drones off the East Coast of the United States of America. We have heard from different members of Congress. Their intelligence suggests that this is Iranian technology, that this is Chinese technology. The White House says they don't know as of right now. They say they don't know what it is, but we're all safe. So many layers here, the politics layers of this, the geopolitics layer of this. Let's start, Tom, with what you know from your reporting about what is actually happening off the coast of New Jersey, and there have been other sightings as well at this point. So what is going on?
Unfortunately, we don't know anything really for sure.
And don't want to hear that answer.
But what is valuable is to look at patterns before. So what we do know is that the Chinese, or what should be known, I actually don't think that many people do know, the Chinese have been very aggressive and capable in flying drones from the United States. So what would be called non-official cover intelligence officers, Chinese spies basically who are not accredited diplomats. So, they're acting essentially in an illegal fashion. And then Chinese intelligence agents, so a student or a business person or a scientist or any Chinese expat who has been told by Beijing, when you're in America, buy this, do this, don't, communicate on your cell phone, fly drones over this base, take photos, take video, bring it back to China or hand it off to this diplomat, that kind of stuff. The Chinese have been doing that a lot for years. And the balloon was the big one that got all the attention. But there is a pattern here. Also in 2023, there were drone sightings strange over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. While the government says it didn't know who was doing that, a Chinese individual, I think the Wall Street Journal reported, was arrested with a drone. So part of it was the Chinese. Why would they be doing that there? Where the F-22s are based, the Chinese would be very concerned about trying to gather, radar signature data, electronic emanations from those planes so they can track them in the event of war with the US, because they're the best, essentially, American fighter jet, stealth jet, hard to track. So the top line is, with some of these places, whether it's Bedminster or military bases, utility networks in New Jersey that would be serving potentially New York City, Chinese would have an interest in gathering intelligence about those things so that in the event of war, they could potentially target them. And, so that's one element. So I think it's highly likely that the Chinese have some role in this because they have a role pretty much anywhere in the US where there's a military nexus and drones are seen in a suspicious fashion. But I don't think that can explain all of it. Certainly the craze of public attention, human psychology means that people want to be part of it. They see a star. I saw a drone tonight. Look, I'm part of this, right? I've experienced it. Civilian, planes being misidentified as drones. But then there are also other drones that match very closely. And, this is actually, had a piece for Unheard on this that with Navy prototype drones. Now, the Pentagon says, well, it's not us and it's not our contractors. Could it be the Department of Energy? Could there be a top secret training thing here? Some of the language originally, when the government was talking this, seemed to be deliberately vague.
They're hedging.
They've now backed away from that.
Okay.
And maybe they've said, okay, stop flying these top secret ones if they were. What they're also doing, though, which I think is problematic and leads to the understandable bleeding of public trust and anger in Congress and state governments, is essentially playing up the narrative that people are seeing things, right? That this is really nothing to be seen here. Don't be too concerned. And they've also been disingenuous. I don't know whether deliberately or not, but John Kirby, who's the White House national security spokesman, who's a retired Navy admiral, was saying, a week ago, there's no evidence that they have been in restricted airspace. But then 2 military bases in New Jersey said they have been in our airspace. Now, maybe he didn't know that. But there clearly is this is not going to go away, and it is compelling. And I also think now, because you see the saturation in terms of some of these drones apparently behaving in ways that are very hard to detect, whether by radar or visual sight. You wonder whether some of it is the stranger type of UFOs, either in and of themselves or mimicking what drones look like. And I know that sounds crazy. 10 years from now, it will not sound crazy.
This is one of Tom's, I think, most prescient areas of reporting before even it went...
Right, the media doesn't want... Most of the media and science don't want to cover it because of the stigma. And there are a lot of, let's say slightly loopy people interested in the UFO topic. But
you're one of them.
Exactly. It is entirely, legitimate that, 0.1% of UFOs are some kind of non-human intelligence or something. Which, again, will be... Hopefully 10 years from now, people will watch this and say he wasn't loopy, or as loopy as we thought he was then.
This is obviously, and we can talk about this in a bit, one of the reasons public trust is bleeding, to use your phrase, because there have been, New York Times reports on the UAP program, and people like Lou Elizondo, whistleblowers, that have come out of the government and have said the truth is not being told, and everything like that. So in this case, if it is likely China, why does the White House, why does the Pentagon not just come out and say, we think this is likely China? Why did they not know that sooner? And why, if they seem to know it now, as Michael McFaul came out this week and said he thinks this is likely Chinese technology, why wasn't that either being said right away, or why is it not being said by more people other than a Republican congressman right now?
I think some of it is China, right? That's the key. I don't think it's all that. I think some of it really is, either the strange type of UFOs or top secret US stuff. It's a lot of different things.
So is it maybe like the US spying on what China, the Chinese spies? Is that what's happening?
It could be. You send up drones to spy on other drones sometimes. The key element probably is China, because it has been traditionally in recent years and continues to be China. I think the two reasons why they wouldn't want to admit it's China. First reason is political. They do not want a conflagration with China as Biden leaves office. I don't think that's in deference to President-elect Trump. But they also just extended a scientific and technology sharing agreement with China that's a 5-year thing that they just sort of pushed through, which seemed to be, at least I wrote for the Examiner saying it was designed to tie Trump's hands. What Biden's thought process is, if he has a thought process generally, but I don't know. The second point is why they wouldn't want to say the FBI's counterintelligence ability to deal with Chinese espionage is woefully inadequate. The scale of Chinese espionage matched against the scale that the FBI has to deal with it, it's like, a NFL team playing a junior high school team. Not in terms of skill, but in terms of scale. The Chinese have such a vast human intelligence apparatus in the US and such a lack of concern about really being caught. And the FBI just don't have the people to deal with it. Do you want to tell Americans, China essentially has impunity to spy on us? Then Americans might want to say, well, don't we need to take a much tougher line against China? And if you don't want to take that line. So I think it's that duality of political consequences and essentially extreme vulnerability.
It's just, so where does Jeff Van Drew, who's a congressman from New Jersey, he came out pretty quickly and said a source told him that this was Iranian. Why does that happen? Why are we ruling out Iran?
I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that maybe someone said, to him, who he trusts, that there was a concern that it might be terrorist related, right, with drones flying over critical infrastructure, which is why, anytime a drone crashes near a nuclear plant or is flying over a nuclear plant, the FBI investigates because they want to make sure it's either not spies preparing to attack that in the event of a war, China, or, ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Lebanese Hezbollah, preparing to do an attack. I don't think there's any good evidence to suggest it would be the Iranians, simply because they don't have the capacity to do that without being detected. The Chinese are really the only ones who could do it on U.S. soil.
And do they want to be seen? Do they want the American public to?
I think they don't particularly. I don't think they particularly want to be seen. I don't think they care very much. The Chinese intelligence officers who have been doing this generally are their modus operandi is to collect intelligence to accomplish their task and leave the ramifications aside, because generally they've got away with it, right? They've been doing this for years and they haven't really been faced major countermeasures from the US for doing it.
It's like so insane. Well, okay, on that note, we've talked about China, we talked about Iran, we've talked about the US.
And I should add very quickly on China, what a lot of their focus has been on sort of military stuff. So flying in Navy training areas, trying to collect collect information on military capabilities that would help them fight the US in war. That's their sort of focus.
What would China get? We've heard that this could be potentially the United States government sniffing out levels of radioactivity. What does China get from flying, if it's China? What are they getting from it? Military tech secrets? What's going on?
Yeah, I just to say, I don't think that radiological thing is accurate, because there's other stuff that would be happening that is not happening if it was that. But what would China get? Well, again, with the F-20, with New Jersey, critical infrastructure, things that could be targeted to affect the civilian population in war. We know, as a point of fact, that the Chinese have, put malware in the U.S. Electricity utilities networks that they could activate in the event of war. Some of that has been detected, and the viewers can go and Google Volt Typhoon. So that's the big one. But then, again, Bedminster, would they be thinking, where could we plant bugs on the ground? Anything they can sort of collect, anything they think is of value that they can get away with doing, the Chinese tend to try and do.
So they're taking pictures and capturing
video.
Yeah,
and emanations, again, it could be, maybe there's top secret US military stuff around those areas that we don't know about, that the Chinese do know about or suspect. And they're trying to gather on that. And again, with drones, it's not just about video or photos. It's also about, some drones you can collect what I would say is more like electronic emanations.
Okay.
So like things coming off, off your cell phone.
Electromagnetic.
Exactly. So technical intelligence.
Okay, interesting. Now, the ufologists, many of whom you know, and you've reported on this for a long time, because they're seeing things around where critical infrastructure might be, that is historically, throughout the Cold War, where UFOs, actual like UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, it's hard to understand the technology behind, seems to manifest.
Right.
Now you're saying that we think this is China because of that. So why rule out UAPs in this case? And I ask you that as somebody who's a very, I think, sober reporter on that topic, on both of these topics, whether it's foreign adversaries or UFOs that could be domestic, but that could be known domestically in the United States. So why point the finger at China?
Well, I think China, is part of it for the aforementioned reasons. It could be this other stranger UFO thing. I think one of the reasons that you have to consider that stranger UFO thing is that, we've seen incidents recently in the UK, which again, I think at a US Air Force base that the available kind of circumstantial evidence would suggest was perhaps Russia doing a similar thing. But this is the saturation in the number of sightings and the apparent impunity of these drones against a pretty big now US government effort to stop them. Why haven't we caught ground controllers operating these things? Mm-hmm. And there is, literature from, I think credible UFOologists that UFOs sometimes mimic technology. So I think it's something that has to be considered.
Are you hearing that from any of your sources that they are considering that?
Not really. They never like to say they're considering that anyway. So I don't think that necessarily means anything. They're loath to talk about that. I also think drones provide an easy escape valve for the government not to talk about UAP or UFOs, right? Because you could say, well, it's a drone. It's something we have to look at because, again, this is happening for weeks now. It's happening with some of these things apparently being extremely capable against extremely capable countermeasures. That would be very hard even for the Chinese to do. It's something we have to consider. And then if it is happening, why? Because clearly it wants to be seen.
Are there nuclear sites around?
Well, there are some, I think there are actually. I don't know for sure, but there are certainly, military bases, there are these incidents where there are multiple sightings over a period of time for no particular reason. We have to consider it.
You mentioned countermeasures. I'm curious what countermeasures we have seen versus what countermeasures we may have expected to see but haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I think what we haven't seen is sort of kinetic strikes, so like firing on things.
The normie question that I have is why aren't these being shot down?
Because they don't want to shoot down civilian planes. They don't want civilians to start shooting them down, which they better get a hold of it because people are going to stop.
It's America.
And planes and helicopters will get shot at.
Yeah.
Which is not funny, obviously, but it's sort of, they don't want, munitions to land on someone's house, right? What they are using, I think, is, where you intercept the communication you try and intercept the communication or block between the operator and the drone. So the drone has no control and it sort of crashes. Or you block its, essentially pulse it so it loses power. But a lot of that doesn't seem to be working. and they don't seem to have got any of them, as far as I know. Public concern is clearly escalating greatly, and there would be obviously a manifest interest for the government to put an end to this, to get stop public concern. Doesn't make the government look good, right? Doesn't make Biden look good as he leaves office. And so there is an interest at a political level to resolve it, and they can't resolve it. So why can't they? Because they do have some very good capabilities, short of munitions. Maybe it's Biden being risk averse, but you would say, okay, send up, an attack helicopter or whatever you want to do, or someone on the ground and shoot at it. And I think if they were doing that, that would have leaked because of the saturated media interest. So, yeah.
How does this compare with the balloon incident from just, 2 years ago now?
I mean, that's a great point, because I think it shows potentially Biden's risk aversion, right? That they didn't wait to shoot that down until it was over the water, until it transited the US. So maybe that's a similar calculation in terms of that China angle or the engagement. But the Chinese use a lot of different things, right? They use balloons, drones, civilian aircraft that they fly off the US, sometimes rent, Cessnas. The Chinese will spy in any way they can feasibly spy.
Are we doing this to them, drone-wise?
Yeah, drones, yes, and sort of underwater stuff, but not in the same blatant way. I mean, it tends to be more off their coast. The US has some cool stuff. I don't know if they're using it, though. I can't imagine Trump tolerating this like Biden has.
But I was going to say, this comes on the heels of Trump basically inviting Xi Jinping to the inauguration.
Right.
Is there part of this is maybe like a pre-Trump, like this is your last attempt to get away with the impunity that you
right. I mean, yeah, it could be, and they're trying to make Biden look weak. I mean, I you don't know. I think that would be a stretch, because Chinese tend to be probably cautious at the moment because they don't want to complicate Trump. They're worried about tariffs and they want to come in on the best possible term. There's a lot we don't know, but we should be open-minded to that.
I want to float the conspiracy theory that I've seen get the most traction by you, which is that this is some type of psyop to make the American public, or to gauge how the public would react to this level of unknown surveillance and having all of these aircrafts hovering above you without any information from the government. Tell me, Tom.
Maybe for the first few days, not now. Few days, no, not weeks, because of the risk to destroying public trust. I also think people who would be doing that, the military or FBI people or Department of Energy who were told to do it, would leak it because they would see it as a betrayal.
What would the point of something like that be?
Testing new technology again, but I think it's highly unlikely.
I mean, you're weirdly like the perfect person to talk about this with, because
probably not a great endorsement, right?
No. Well, I say weirdly because it's the intersection. It's like this perfect intersection of your beats.
Right.
It's like, how has it been covering it?
Fun. I mean, it's interesting. Clearly, something significant is happening, and the government doesn't appear capable of dealing with it, which is a pretty big thing. I think it's a genuine concern. And everyone is saying it's not, is because they don't know how to deal with it and they want it to go away, which is the government.
You're so informative. So
well, thank you. I love coming on, so appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you. Tom Rogan. We'll be back soon with more. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's edition of Undercurrents. I wanted to be careful with this story. I mean, it has been going on for weeks, but some of the speculation has been thin, and we just don't know what's happening. And that's been the case. Like, this is the pattern that's repeated itself over weeks now, literally weeks now. So to me, it seems prudent to gather a lot of different reactions from people in government. And I feel like at this point, it's really damning. Like we now have a reaction from Joe Biden. As of this week, we have a reaction from Joe Biden. We have members of Congress saying that this is Iran, saying this is China. We have that joint statement from intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, the FAA, in which they're basically like everything's fine. And the sightings continue. So this felt like the right time to go really deep with Tom, and man, was he helpful. I hope that he was as helpful to you as he was to me. I found it super, super interesting, and a great context and perspective to sort of understand why the government is saying what it is, why they might be not saying what they're not saying. So thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to remember to subscribe here on the YouTube channel, Undercurrents. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, with a new episode of the show. You can go over to undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. And of course, if you're a podcast listener like me, make sure to subscribe wherever you download those podcasts. We'll be back here tomorrow with more.